I'm assuming that nobody here is a telecoms carrier or an implementer of WhatsApp or Tinder, any of those types of apps. That's all the P2P stuff. If you are, I'm happy to talk about it later. Call me after, catch me afterwards and we can discuss it. So I'm not going to talk about person to person. And I'm only going to talk about application to application in this slide here, because the cloud doesn't change much. Your systems are already communicating with lots of other applications, and that's just standard IP, whether it's TCP IP, if it's HTTP, that's running on TCP IP. That's all the same. That doesn't change at all. There's just a couple of things that you do need to consider, whether you're the one who's communicating with a service that's in the cloud, or whether you're implementing your service in the cloud and you've got your customers connecting to you. And that is that the cloud provides scalability, but there's a cost to that, and that's latency. And so that means that when you need to increase the available services so that they can handle the higher scale system, you've got a lot more requests coming in. You've got all those peak requests, it's midnight, nobody does anything, 9 a.m. everyone logs in, or if it's Tinder, it's the other way around, that sort of thing. So you get these peaks of behavior. You have to spin up new services, and that takes time. It's on the order of minutes. So you need to be able to handle that with something that knows about it in front of it. You can get that for free for most of your services, but if you're in full control of your cloud platform, and it might be a hybrid platform like I asked earlier on, then you need to have something at the front end that understands what's behind it, what the services are, when they're available, when they're not available, and distributes that across there. So that's something that you need to be aware of if you're implementing it, and if you're communicating to a cloud, something that's another service that's implementing the cloud, you want that to be there, because otherwise you get these requests, and then every once in a while you get a huge delay in a request coming back to you, and there's no particular reason. The reason is they're spinning up a service. And similarly, obviously, you want your requests to go to the local services rather than the distant ones. You don't want to make a request and have it handled by the Chinese server. You want to have it handled more locally. So those are the only two things really that you have to worry about for application to application. The rest of what I'll talk about is application to person. So your application wants to communicate with people. And there's a lot of different reasons. Here's some examples of the ways you want to do that within your business, why your business wants to do that. And so there's a few companies that are called cloud communication providers who provide an API for your application to do those various things: sending an SMS, receiving an SMS, setting up a voice handling system, a menuing system, so you can just have people come in and say, even if people don't really like it, but it's very efficient to do that, even if it's just the first level, or even if you're going to communicate with the over-the-top apps, they're called chat apps, WeChat, WhatsApp, these ones. All these kinds of things, you get a cloud communication provider. Now, you could say, well, why don't I do it direct? Doing it direct is very difficult. All of the telecoms providers are still 20th century companies. They don't understand charging per second, per text. They only understand, if you're a business, they want you to sign a nice big contract and request minimum pricing and minimum amounts that you have to pay for. Cloud communications provider, we take all the pain out of there. You set up your account in 1 minute. It's probably got a couple of credits on it, but if it doesn't, you stick a credit card on there. You give yourself 10 quid worth of credits and you're off. And send a text for pennies, start up a voice call for per second billing at a very cheap price. So that's what a cloud communication provider does for you. One of the sort of examples that makes you understand perhaps exactly what you're doing here is a Forrester estimate, which is 40 quid. All right, but it's Forrester, so it's American, so that's why it's $70 there. That's how much it costs to reset a password, because you have to call up a call center and somebody handles it. And once a person's involved, it's expensive. So lots of companies have tried to move over to an email reset. You click on the web form, you enter your email, you get this email sent to you, and you have to click on that and change the password. That's great, except that it turns out that if you call up a call center that handles the accounts of whichever company, and you say, oh no, I can't access my old email, I've lost that and I've started a new email, can you change the email on my account? And they'll say, yes, what's your name and address and your birth date? And then they'll change that because it's not considered critical, the email account. What they'll often do is email the old account to tell it that it's been changed. But in any case, so you've got, if you're a hacker, you go in there, and this is one of the most common hacks around, is to just change the email on an account and then reset the password. It's your account. The email's now coming to your account, you reset the password. So this is considered very unsafe now. If you have accounts that do that, you have to worry about how safe your account is. Hopefully, there's billions of people in the world, you won't get hacked. So safety in numbers, we're like fish in schools. If you've been to any big organization, they've moved on to this self-service system where you click on it and it comes through and asks you, what's your favorite cat name, or what was your first cat, or things like that. The initial ones are really easy to guess because lots of people have their Facebooks and they say what their cats are and things like that. So it becomes quite easy to guess if somebody's trying to hack you. So they get more and more complex. What's the middle name of your second child or your niece or something like that? People don't like those questions because I don't really want to tell them my mother's maiden name. I mean, even if that's a standard one. And then also, you start picking random questions and just putting fake answers in. And they even recommend that. They say, well, don't bother, don't worry about it, just choose a random one, put a fake answer in, which is great because you either have to write that down, but even if you write it down, you forget it all the time. So these end up at some point with you calling up a call center saying, I've forgotten my password and I've forgotten the answers to all my questions. So it doesn't help out. And what we've gone to as an industry standard for password reset, and this becomes exceedingly cheap compared to any other solution, is just you click the reset and it sends your phone a text with a PIN code. So when you get to the website, you have to enter the PIN code and enter your new password. Google's doing this, everyone's doing this now if they want to be secure. So at some point they've asked for your mobile phone number and that's attached to your account. You've clicked the little button that says do that. It's called two-factor authentication. So there's the two factors are, when in this case, one factor is something you know, which is your account ID or your email, something like that. And the other factor is, in this case is, and typically something that you have your mobile phone. It's very, very difficult to hack that because somebody has to nick your phone, which is unlikely, and you notice it fairly quickly. So we're talking about business critical. Business critical means it's important that we get something to somebody in a timely way. We want to be able to reach the person. We want it to get to them reliably in a timely way, and we want them to notice it. 6 billion people in the world have a mobile phone. I say 95% in the UK. It's not entirely certain what it is in the UK because there are more mobile phone contracts and pay-as-you-go than there are people in this country. So, of course, lots of people have more than one phone. So the actual penetration is not, you can guess anywhere between 95 and 100. There are people who don't have mobile phones, but I'm guessing that most of your mothers has one. You know, if you ask, they might have the landline, but they've probably got a mobile now as well, so that they can reach you in emergencies. It's standard. So you'd be surprised, practically everybody has a mobile. The provider, if you're going to use a mobile phone as a mechanism to reach your customer, the provider needs to have a global reach. That's not the case if you're determined to only be in the UK, but typically you want to reach phones wherever they are. And this has certain implications in the cloud providers because you can get some very cheap providers that don't really understand quite how to connect, and they'll send all your messages or all your phone calls over to Vodafone because they've got a nice big contract with Vodafone, and then Vodafone will relay it on to all the other customers, all the other carriers if you want. But unfortunately those interconnection between telecoms aren't that great. So you start losing quality or losing messages or getting delays. So that it's better to have a provider who's a global reach. And there are restrictions in every country. Some of them are very free and easy. In this country, it's quite easy, but in certain countries, you're not allowed to send certain types of information or texts after midnight or after 9 o'clock, 9 to 9 in the morning. Other countries, severe content restrictions about what you're allowed to send. China, quite a few of the Middle East have very severe content restrictions. So you want to be able to reach the person, you want to do it reliably, and you want anything to get to them in, because if you're setting a reset, if you're doing a reset on your password, it's a time limited code. It doesn't last indefinitely. So it gets them in an hour, it's useless. So you want to make sure that your provider has as few hops as possible. Ideally, they're connected to every carrier globally, or certainly the carriers where your customers are. That's the important thing. And that means that there's very little delay and very unlikely to get rejections. And I've gone on about messaging. And the reason is that messaging has a fantastic engagement rate. There's very little spam in messaging. This is true of voice as well. There's very little spam, but actually there's more spam in voice. All those PPI calls that you're getting, that actually get more of those than you do in messaging. So you want some sort of mechanism when you reach the customer where he's not going to ignore the message. Not like email where you filter out, either your spam system is really good, in which case you're filtering out a lot of business email as well, or your spam system is really bad and then you're seeing lots of spam. And you can't broadcast voice and SMS. You can do these conference calls, but it's not the same thing. You can't really broadcast them. So all of these are good points. The fact that it's not free is good. It reduces the spam. The fact that you can't broadcast is good because it reduces the spam. It means that it's a channel that you don't ignore. And as it turns out, people are really responsive to texts. They tend to read them quite quickly. Even if they're in a meeting, if you get a text now, you've got your phone on silent, you pick it out and you look at it because you know it's only going to take a couple of seconds to just see what the text was. So you look at it. And you tend to do that with your messaging systems as well, with if you've got a WhatsApp coming in. The other thing about the phone is that it's becoming the identity. All right, so it's not your passport, but a lot of applications don't need detailed identity. And a lot of the applications like banks who do need detailed identity have a long procedure where they identify who you are and ask for your phone, your mobile phone, and then subsequently they just use your phone as a re-authentication. So when you're setting up a new payment to a new person, they don't send you an email, a surface mail anymore, as they used to do sometimes quite a while back. Now they just send you a PIN code to your phone, and you have to type that in to the phone when you're setting up a new provider. So this is really common, making the phone your identity. So in this case, what they've done is, and in a lot of the cases, they don't really care who you are. They just want to make sure that they can identify that whoever set up the account is the same person when they're doing it later. In other cases, it does matter. There's a legal framework here, know your customer. You have to know who your customer is, but they still need that quick authentication. Otherwise, the services become unusable. So governments love this because they're very used to the phone system, the SMS system, and there's a lot of regulations around it, there's a lot of infrastructure around it, and they know that they can access everything. So they're delighted for the mobile phone to become the identity, the quick authentication identity. I just thought I'd go through the options of reaching your customers generically. The most is phone, is a voice phone. That's the most reachable, that's the way you can reach the most number of people in the world and in any country. Everybody has, not everybody, but if you want to reach the most number of people, that's great. The trouble is, people don't really like to be contacted out of the blue by businesses. It's really annoying. not even just the PPI. Even if it's businesses you're using, you still don't want them. I get the phone call from the bank and I'm not really interested, unless I've requested it. That's a different thing. If I've gone onto the website and said, please contact me, then I'm waiting for that. And I want them to call me quickly in that case. But generally, out of the blue, they don't want that. The next most reachable way you can reach your customers is on the internet. A lot of the world has the internet. But you're kind of limited because you can't do that asynchronously. They have to be on your website at the time. So if you want to just ping off to your customer in a reliable way, then SMS tends to be the most optimal way to do it. Increasingly, we've got smartphones with apps. And that's great if you can get your app onto the phone, but this is a really, really fragmented and difficult market. Even if your customers are using your website, they can't be bothered to download your app for the most part. What they have downloaded is a messaging app. Almost certainly on any smartphone, you've got one of the messaging app. This is the order of the most number of people on the apps. WhatsApp has 800 million, WeChat has 600 million, Facebook Messenger 500 million, something like that. Line about 250 million. So the messaging app, I'll just go back to there. The advantage of these is that it's a platform which you know your customers are likely to have something like this on their phone. So it's a potential app channel. And I'll just mention WeChat because although you're probably most familiar with WhatsApp, WeChat is actually leading the innovation. That's because in China, a lot of the country are using it, and they're not just using it to talk to each other, they're using it for all sorts of entertainment, shopping, travel, and they're spending money on that platform. So WeChat was one of the first of the messaging apps to develop a really good API, a really good platform that you can see externally. So if you're a small little business, you can use their API, you can set up your brand on WeChat, and you can have customers come to you on WeChat and spend money through WeChat. All the other messaging apps want to copy this because they're looking at that number down there, the 2 billion already being spent on it and seeing it going up. And they want to have that money spent through their platform. So they're all trying to copy WeChat. Most particular, Facebook Messenger is desperately trying to catch up there. Facebook owns Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp if you're not available. But WhatsApp, the founder of WhatsApp doesn't want it to be a business platform. And Facebook at the moment are going with that. If you ever see the founder of WhatsApp leave Facebook, that's because they've decided to make it a business platform as well. So in the meantime, Facebook Messenger is becoming their platform for businesses. The messaging apps, WhatsApp and so on, they're not mature. I'm not just talking about the platform that you're used to, but the APIs in particular, the way you would actually use them as a business. They're not mature, they're very rapidly evolving. Some of them don't even have an API. Some of them have an API that's private and they're only letting very restricted partners use them. They all have different capabilities. Some will let you send a video with a text and an image, and some will only let you send a text. So it's all quite different. So if you want to, obviously, I'm from a cloud provider and we provide everything that's mentioned here. But so you want a cloud provider that handles all of those gotchas behind the scenes, a nice simple API. The other thing to watch out for is Tencent is the Chinese company that owns WeChat. So that's the one with the 600 billion users working on it, and they get 2 billion a year. Uber, you know Uber, the new taxi cab firm. Uber does quite a lot of business in China. Five of their top 10 cities in terms of business are in China. They do a lot of business in China. There's another native Chinese company called Didi Kuaidi, which is Uber competitor. Tencent are invested in Didi Kuaidi. It used to be two companies, and then they merged into one, and Tencent got invested in it. So Tencent, there's a little conflict of interest here because Uber is running on WeChat and doing quite a bit of business through there. Tencent are invested in their competitor. Earlier this year, around about February, Uber started finding there were problems with their account on WeChat. First, they were they had some accounts shut down from violation of certain terms of which they couldn't quite understand. Then they had more technical problems which kicked off other ones of their accounts. So they had, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen accounts. They were all shut down within a matter of months. Uber's recently gone public to complain about it and say it's obviously a bit of a conflict of interest. So there's an issue there if you're going to use a messaging provider. If you're going to get big, obviously they're not going to care about anyone small, but if you're going to get big, there could be a conflict of interest. The only thing you can do about that, short of regulation by the government, is to be using multiple messaging apps so that you can reach your customer on multiple. Most people tend to have more than one messaging app on their smartphone because you've got the generic one that everybody has, and then you've got your little group that you tend to be meeting up with. Even if the other one is Tinder, but it could be Yo, it could be any of these ones. So if you've got multiple channels, then you can at least bypass the conflict of interest. So I'm on my last slide now. You'll be happy to know. And I'm just going to finish off by looking at the present state of cloud communications and how it's going to go in the future. In terms of person-to-person texting, that's peaked. That's already now on the downslope because people are moving that to messaging apps. You've still got every mobile phone's still handling SMS, but typically you're using your WhatsApp or whatever messaging app you're using to talk to your friends. So that's on the decrease. It's actually still massive, but it's on the decrease. But the thing that we're most interested in, the business critical cloud communications, that's increasing rapidly because the phones become the identity. SMS has no spam. It's a very attentive channel for people to reach. That's actually becoming the standard way for businesses to communicate with customers. Just a little detail, messaging apps, I think the number of messages on just WhatsApp overtook the total number of messages in the year. Not even messaging app, just one of them. So the thing is that at the moment you want to use this channel. This is going to be increasingly important. And in 10 years' time, I'll be very surprised if you are not talking to your customers through some messaging app. So you need to keep your eye on that if you want to talk to your customers. But that's the way to go at the moment. Use the SMS text. That's it. Questions?
Hi. When you log onto some websites, they already have instant messaging there for you. How does that fit into your model? Where are we going with that? Is that another?
So that's like the talk to me issue. So there's there's a technology called WebRTC, which is a kind of messaging capability through the internet, through IP. That's a great way to talk to your customers. If they've come to your website, it's nice and free, but you don't get any authentication using that mechanism. So you're the business, you don't really know who's talking to you. Okay, so if somebody has hacked an account, they can pretend to be that. You've got no idea that's your customer or that's just somebody else. So that's where you have to worry about that. But certainly if they come to your website and you don't want to make a phone call, or they don't want to make a phone call, that's a nice way of doing it. It's a technology. Again, the cloud communication providers will do that, and that tends to be free because it's very difficult to charge for something that can be free. I would say always have the chat to me, talk to me option there.
If you don't have that, they're going to call you. An agent can handle 4 people at once versus one on the phone. So.
Exactly. So that's what they're saying, that with the web chat, an agent can handle multiple customers at the same time.
Yep. But what's happened with most businesses is that they want to retain the customers, which means that you want to let the customer contact you the way they want to, rather than the way you would like them to, which is the cheapest way. So what you tend to do is enable all the options and try and nudge them to the cheaper one, but you want to have everything available. So there's different things we're talking about. We're talking about just enabling the communications. You want to have all the options there. So currently, a lot of the airlines are looking to make available their interface, the equivalent of their website on the messaging app, so that because everyone's on a messaging app, so you just want to send a message to whichever airline you're traveling on. Is it late? All right, which doesn't require any confidential information. It doesn't matter who asked that question. They can send that back to you immediately. They can have that can be an automated response. In fact, that's actually, I think KLM has that capability. So that these kinds of capabilities, a lot of companies are trying to make that available to their customers. So easy questions that don't require authentication, great, just send the message in and we'll send it back to you on whatever channel you prefer, which is, you're sitting on the phone in the airport, texting your friends, or rather WhatsApping your friends, you want to send it in the same channel, that's great. The more detailed thing, like verifying who your customer is, ensuring that if there's an alert, you want it to get to them in a way that they're going to notice. Anything like that that's not a matter of communications, then you want to be careful about which channel you use. And then there's the way you let the customers contact you. It's cheaper, for example, to let them come through to an automated menu system than it is to speak to a person, even if that's going to get to a person, but you can filter it to the right person through your menu system. And that's immediately cheaper. That even cuts out a layer of people. So all of these things are things that it makes your business more contactable, which is what the customers want, but it doesn't increase the cost to you, which is what you want.
Aside from, you mentioned needing a dual-aware proxy, what other issues have you hit trying to implement all of this on a cloud-based solution?
So the main thing is we do what I asked earlier, which is a hybrid model. Latency is very critical to us, and any company which has a latency critical service cannot do it in the cloud. They can do it with very, very, a great deal of care, but typically you have your own hardware. It's not necessarily owned by you, it could be rented. So we rent ours in a data center, that's very common. But we own the machine while we're renting it, and then it's only got the operating system on it, and then we put our services on it. That part of it, the latency specific part, the latency critical part, has to be like that. It's very difficult to make a low latency system run in the cloud. What the cloud gives you is scalability instead of the low latency. So anything that doesn't need to be low latency, we can put into the cloud. Anything that all the data analysis, anything that's that we would do offline, or anything that's if it's a customer-facing thing, we can put into the cloud. We can do all of that. So we have a hybrid system, and it's very critical for us to identify exactly what has to be low latency, and we keep full control of that. And a lot of the systems that, like the big data stuff, that tends to overflow into the cloud. Anything that's a debug system, all of our development, QA testing, all of that will go in the cloud.
Cool, well, thank you very much, Jack.
You're welcome.